Hi everyone, welcome to the Jiu Jitsu podcast. My name is Stacy. I am a Jiu Jitsu and this is my podcast. Welcome back everyone. I'm super excited to bring you this interview that I did with Ashley Richey. She and I had an amazing conversation about what it's like to have a chronic illness and also train jiu-jitsu. Well, I mean, you're going to hear all about it, so I don't want to give too much away before you listen, but basically, the physical toll that takes, the mental toll that takes, and then kind of how we get through it, both individually, but also with the support of our team. So this is going to be a really good listen. I do need to preface this, though, by saying there is audio interference during this conversation. I have done everything that I am technologically skilled at doing to remove and reduce the interference, but I can't get all of it. So unfortunately, there will be some blips and blops and scratches here and there. I apologize in advance. I really, really, really hope that this doesn't turn you off of listening to the conversation, because I really do think that this conversation is so important to have out there. So knowing that, please enter this conversation with an open mind and a willingness to actually listen to what's being said. And so with that, I present to you Ashley Richey. All right, I am here with Ashley Richey.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's such an honor. I'm so thrilled to be asked. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Could you please introduce yourself for the podcast audience?
Sure. So my name is Ashley Richey. I live in Ottawa, Canada. I currently train at Gracie Baja Ottawa East, my home gym, under the amazing leadership of our professor, Evan Bishop. And I am a 4-stripe white belt currently. And I started my jiu-jitsu journey actually just over a year ago. It was October 2022.
Awesome. Okay, can I ask you the question? How did you get started in jiu-jitsu? How did you arrive at that place?
So my story is actually a little complicated, I suppose, or a little bit longer. So growing up, I actually played sports. I played competitive basketball and competitive soccer. I did grow up in a really small town, so, probably made the team by the skin of my teeth, but and then once I moved on to university, I kind of just phased out of that and went on with my education. And then when I met my husband, I got back into athletics again and working out and going to the gym and things. But unfortunately, by that point, kind of I had put on a bit of weight and wasn't as athletic and healthy as I used to be. And then we started our family. So I have a daughter. And when she was born, it just sort of that light bulb moment hit where I was like, hey, I need to get healthy. I need to do this for her. I need to do this for me. And I need to be around for a long time. And so over the course of the next year, I actually lost 85 pounds. Got very healthy.
That is not easy to do.
Not easy. And just kind of did it the old fashioned way, worked out, ate healthy, drank lots of water, did all the things you're supposed to do. And then the pandemic hit. And of course, everyone, we got, stuck at home and had to deal with all that stuff. And, I was feeling a lot of stress, sort of like everyone. But then, as things started to open up again, I was like, you know what? I'm not feeling great still. Something's not feeling right here. Mm-hmm. And so I saw my doctor and she did a bunch of tests and she was like, there's this one blood marker that's a little off, kind of shows there's some inflammation going on, but, I'll send you to someone, but I don't think you'll get a referral. I think they'll reject it. And so they actually saw me 2 weeks later. And a week after that, I was diagnosed with psoriatic arthritis, which is, for those who don't know, it's an autoimmune disease. And it's different from regular arthritis in that, the arthritis your grandparents would have is just degenerative over time. The body starts to wear down. Whereas psoriatic arthritis and rheumatoid arthritis are actually autoimmune diseases where your body is hey, your ligaments and your joints don't belong in your body and we're going to attack them. And so it's super painful. And unfortunately, like I actually have a friend who has it as well, and she has it in like one knee and one ankle. So traditionally, it's sort of like one side of your body and like a couple joints. Mine is everywhere because,
Oh no.
go big or go home. And so over the next year after I was diagnosed, we started to look into different treatment options, but my quality of life really like came crashing down. Like I couldn't walk. At my lowest, like I was literally crawling to bed because I was in so much pain. So I went from like this fit, healthy, happy mom to like kind of a shell of myself. And so that was really hard. And then in November 2021, Gracie Baja Ottawa East opened. And we had a friend who was signing up their child and had posted about it. And so my daughter and my husband actually joined as founding members. And so they got right into Jiu Jitsu and Muay Thai, and they were loving it. And I was like, I am so angry with everyone and the world right now because these are the things I want to be doing and I can't do them. And so I sat on the sidelines for a year, and I was like their biggest cheerleader, showing up to all the practices. And, looking back at it now, I actually was like learning by watching, which was pretty cool. And so it was actually that summer I had a day at the park with my daughter where I felt really good. So we played. It was amazing. And then I sat on the couch for 2 days because I couldn't move. And so I went to my doctor shortly after that and was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, we have to figure out a treatment. Like, I have to be able to be a mom. And so I worked really hard over the next year to find a treatment plan that worked for me, and got really lucky and had. I'm doing really well right now. And then, so in October of 2021, I was like, you know what? I'm going to try. Sorry, actually, before that, our gym has Baja Fit. For those who are in the Gracie Baja family.
Yes, Baja Fit.
Awesome. So it's like a fitness. It kind of incorporates Jiu Jitsu and Muay Thai principles. So it's like a teaser before you actually jump all in. And so I was like, I joined that, did that for a few months, started to take off. I had to take steroids while I was sick, so I put on a lot of steroid weight. So started to kind of get fit and take all that off. And one of my friends said to me, when are you going to do Jiu Jitsu? And I was like, oh, no. Like, I will never do Jiu Jitsu. My spine is a mess. There's zero chance I can roll like that. I'm not doing it. And 2 weeks later, I actually did my first Jiu Jitsu class. Because, like, I'm one of those people where, like, once you've planted that seed, I'm like, well, maybe I could do that. So I decided I would do family class with my husband and my daughter. Did that for a couple of weeks, and then bought my first gi and did my first class, I think, like, the last week of October last year.
Oh, that's so great. Oh my gosh. I'm just so happy for you, and the fact that you live with a chronic illness. I do too. I have a different flavor of illness, but I still have one, But the fact that you were able to insist on a treatment for yourself, so that self-advocacy piece is so important. The fact that you were able to insist on a treatment, it's like, no, I'm not going to live this way. I refuse, and that you finally found a treatment that was working. And I mean, even with having to take I had to take steroids when I was first diagnosed with mine too, like, and it sucked. But, I guess I kept telling myself, like, it's only temporary. It's only temporary. That was like the hope I clung on to, because living life in my body taking steroids was not comfortable either, as I'm sure you are well aware.
I am.
Anybody who's ever had to take steroids for medical reasons, I'm sure you guys are all nodding along with us. But it's just, I don't know, like, I always get this like twinge in my heart when people are able to do what they want to do, despite medical things going on, because I know that that's not necessarily the case for everybody.
Yeah.
So I'm just really glad that was the case for you.
Thank you. And I know, like, I count myself incredibly blessed, because I know I have friends who also have other autoimmune or chronic illnesses. And when I was diagnosed, they were like, it's going to take years and you're going to have to be okay with that. And at the time, of course, I'm like, no, it's not going to take years. I'm going to be different. And I wasn't. But I consider myself incredibly blessed that even though, I still go through this on a daily basis and I have good days and bad days, I've come to a place where, like, I can live my life again and battle through those bad days. Because I know there's a lot of people listening, or my friends still who like that's not their reality. They're still in and out of hospitals, and it's been years. So I do, as much as to turn back the clock of time, I would love to find a reason to prevent myself from getting this, which I know is impossible, but I do consider myself incredibly blessed where I am in my life right now.
Yeah. I think everybody can relate to that feeling of if I could turn back the clock and do things a little differently to prevent, this or that from happening, God, I can think of so many things I would go back and like redo or do differently. But at the same time, I have to wonder, like, it's like the, I don't know. I don't think it's the butterfly effect, but it's basically like, well, when people like to speculate about how would historical events have been different if this one change had been made, 700 years ago, kind of a thing. And it's like, well, we don't actually know, like, because we don't know how people would have reacted to that new reality. So who's to say that if I changed that one thing, that my life would be better than it is? What if I changed one thing and then it ended up worse? Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
So
completely.
I don't know. I've gone through in my mind just like, oh, the what ifs. Oh my gosh, all the time. What if this? What if that? Why didn't I this? Why didn't I that? Could I only just blah, 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 blah. And it's just, sometimes I get stuck in the spiral, and sometimes I kind of have to like shake myself out of it and be like, but that's not how it went. like just focus on where you are now and then just like move forward. But it's hard to do that sometimes, I think. At least for me anyway. Maybe it's not for you.
No, I completely agree. And I also, I get in those moments where I'm like, and I try not to like victimize myself, but, we all have those moments. But then I also think like, at the moment where I was diagnosed, I was probably the healthiest I've ever been as an adult. So it's like, what really could I have been doing differently? Probably not a lot, because unfortunately, I'm just medically, this was my medical journey. Like, this is what was meant to happen, and we figure out how to deal with it and move forward. And I do think things happen for a reason, right? Like, maybe I wouldn't be doing jujitsu if this hadn't happened, right? Maybe I would be a CrossFitter or have already gotten into something else. Like, it's hard to say. So yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying. Like, things just happen the way they're supposed to happen to bring you to the place that you're at.
Yeah. And I think that's something I've had to not really dwell on, but like I've had to kind of reflect on that over the years, and just kind of eventually I circle myself back around to the realization that like I made the decisions I made with the knowledge I had at the time, and that's all I can really do. And so, because I have to, with my chronic illness, I was diagnosed with my chronic illness well before I ever started training jiu-jitsu. So, I've never been a jiu-jitsu without having my chronic illness. And like, it's like, look how, I've been training for almost 8 years now. It's like, that hasn't stopped me. It's not always been smooth sailing, of course, but I haven't quit, So I think, I don't know, at the end of the day, that's sort of where it lies, isn't it? It's like, we just don't quit.
Yeah. I think my thing too with my journey in jiu-jitsu has always been, I'm a huge proponent in like not comparing your journey to anybody else, because everyone is completely different, and it just completely takes the joy out of the process. But for me, and you may feel the same way having a chronic illness, like I always come at jiu-jitsu every day with because I can. Like, I get to do jiu-jitsu today because I can, because I know at any moment my meds can stop working, or a joint can flare up and be extremely swollen and I can't actually move, or, a million things can happen. And so every day that I get to go into the gym, like, I get to do this because I can. And so I think I come at it from a really different perspective than some people who are like, I just want to go in and smash everyone. Like, I'm not here for that. I'm here because I'm literally honoring my body in a way that I get to. I'm a lot, like, it's pretty special.
Yeah. There've been a lot of days where I've come into my classes, and it basically have been like, I just don't have the energy to like do anything intense right now. Like, can we just, I don't know, just work on techniques? Can we just like flow roll? Can we just, can we just do this or that or the other? Because I'm like, getting here is a win some days, it's like dragging myself out of bed, getting myself dressed, getting myself ready to act, and then actually leaving the house. We got to count that as a win today.
100%.
So then like everything else is extra, and like I just don't have enough energy to expend on like all this being intense on all this stuff. I was just like, I just can't do it today. Because like for me, like, so I have Crohn's disease, I don't think I've made that a secret. I'm pretty open about this stuff. I have Crohn's disease. And so for me, it's all like gastrointestinal. And, you know, your body and like your mental health are very closely entwined, as anybody with any chronic illness knows. It is hard. It is hard sometimes to wake up every day and actually get yourself out of bed and like do things when you don't feel well. It's just some days are just bad. And those are the days that I'm just like, I can't leave the house. I can't do anything. So then I don't. And so those are the days I don't go to class. Because, I mean, I know everybody's like, oh, well, you know, you come to Jiu Jitsu and you leave, it's like therapy, you leave feeling better than you came in. And like, yes, that's true. But also, I don't want to bring my like dark rain cloud energy into the mats, because then it's going to rain on everyone else, if that makes sense. Like, it's not fair to everyone else to have me just kind of being there like, while they're trying to train. Yep. Do you know what I mean? Like, so maybe that's just my view. Maybe other people have different views on that. But like for me personally, I'm just like, it's not fair to everyone else for me to try to force myself out of the house when I just really can't do that today. If I, you know, and then I'm just like, if I go there, I'm just going to be like tired, not really participating, not really paying attention, because my brain is just zoning out. It's just not a good look. It's just not fair. It's not fair to them, and it's just kind of a waste of energy for me, because what am I getting out of it even?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and I've had days like that too, where I've gone in. I'm blessed that I have a couple of really amazing training partners that I can be super honest with. And there was a day actually last week where I ran into one of them and was like, let's work together tonight. But just caveat, like my body is feeling terrible today. My back's a mess. Like, you know, the live roll at the end, like slow roll, or like I'm totally fine. Like I can sit out, you can roll hard with someone else. Like whatever works for you. But I also was at the place where if she had been like, you know what, I really want to go hard tonight, I would have just like chilled and watched or gone home or whatever. Like I'm not, you know, like you said, I don't want people to have to adjust their training and game to facilitate whatever it is that I need in that moment. So, but that's the cool thing about jiu-jitsu, right? Like it's always there. So the next day is going to be different and we can come back and it's like you've lost no time and everyone's excited to see you. So it's totally okay to take those breaks and moments. You just got to come back. You can't ghost.
Yeah. And that's the thing too, is it really does, at least for me anyway, it really does sometimes go day by day. And I think, so my home gym, Gracie Baja Downers Grove, that's the only place I've ever trained. I've never trained anywhere else. And so the people who've also been there for several years, like we all really know each other very well, you know. And over the years, especially the last 2.5 years, I would say, they've seen me really, really struggle with my mental health. It had just gotten increasingly bad. I would say since the pandemic. I don't think the pandemic is what caused it. I think the pandemic is what took away all of my distractions, where I was pretending it was fine. And when that went away, I finally had to realize, like, oh, this is not fine. This is not fine. And so then that's sort of when that started. But anyway, yeah, they've seen kind of the gamut of everything. And so they all know that I struggle with these things. Also, I've talked about it on socials and stuff before too. So they all know. And so a lot of the people I've trained with, a lot of the guys I've trained with for years, you know, when they see me show up, we kind of check in with each other. It's like, how are you today? And I'll be like, I'm okay today, you know. Or if I seem particularly peppy, they'll be like, how are you today? I'll be like, I'm good. Today's a good day. And be like, great. We love to hear that, you know. And so it's just kind of like we were saying, it honestly just kind of goes day by day. How are you today? Today's a good day. How are you today? Today, I'm okay. How are you today? I'm here. I mean, and I think they know how to sort of interpret those responses, because I'm also prone to info dumping and oversharing. So I try to kind of keep my responses like short, because nobody needs to know like all of my problems all the time. But I think like they've learned how to interpret like what I say, I think. So it's like, you know, it's a good day. I'm okay. I'm here. I'm tired. You know, like that kind of stuff. And like, I think they all sort of know how to, I guess, interact with me. Like, are they kind of know like the expectations are different that day based on what I'm able to give versus on other days when I can give more, if that makes sense.
Totally, totally. And isn't it cool that like your gym family becomes your second family and that they
They
can
really do.
read you and like, I had something happen a few weeks ago where I had to stay off the mats for a week but didn't really publicize it. I just kind of was coming in with my daughter and leaving, and it was probably halfway through the week my professor actually said, "Are you okay? What's going on?" I filled him in and just took a bit more time off. And but the fact that you're in this environment, you've created this family where people are like, hey, something's not quite right, or like, people are texting and checking in on each other, and it's about jujitsu, but it's so much more than jujitsu. At least in my experience.
Yeah, I would wholeheartedly agree with that. Like, I've never had so many older brothers in my life. Growing up, I don't actually have any blood brothers. Like, it was me and my sister. And then my sister got married, and so I had my brother-in-law, who's my brother. And then I started jujitsu, and now it's like, I've got so many older brothers who are like teasing, like they tease and they joke around, but they also really look out for me too, which I appreciate, like especially at like the rock bottom of my mental health issues before I finally like did something about it. But it was very obvious something was wrong. And they were checking in on me. It was like, hey, are you okay? I'm like, no. They're like, well, did something happen? Nope, it's just me. Like, oh, okay. Do you want to train with us today? Nope. Thank you for asking. Okay, well, we're here if you change your mind. Okay, thank you. Like they're looking out, they're looking out for me. They care, and then when things are good, they're acting kind of like the older, it's like teasing me, like making jokes, poking fun, like all that kind of stuff. And it's just, I just really appreciate that. Like that kind of brotherhood, sisterhood, camaraderie, like that. Yeah, I mean, it's jujitsu, like everybody's there to train, but we're not necessarily ignoring the person in favor of the training. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it totally does. And as you were saying that, I was thinking about too, like the different people in the gym, right? Like it's brought together people who typically wouldn't necessarily be friends or like cross paths. And it creates this like common ground where you could actually get to know people in a different way and like a very intimate way, right? Like,
yeah,
my husband and I have like full trust, so he has like no issue with me rolling with men or women, but like you're in very intimate situations sometimes with guys, and there has to be a completely different level of trust. And I think that extends beyond the mat just because of the virtue of what we're doing.
Yeah, I would agree. Because it's kind of hard not to. Like, you have to trust these people with your physical safety.
Yeah.
Also kind of a little bit with your mental and emotional safety because of like the attitude that people bring, whether it's positive or negative, like that's going to have an effect on everybody else. And so, you're kind of putting your trust in them that they are going to take care of you. Physically, like they're not going to harm you. They're not going to like crank on a shoulder lock or whatever, dislocate your shoulder or whatever. They're not going to choke you out until you pass out, kind of a thing. You know what I mean? Like you have to trust they're going to physically take care of you, but then also like mentally too, like that they're not going to be posturing with this weird ego attitude type of thing, that they're not going to be like smash and passing white belts, that they're not going to be like trying to tap, like that they're not going to try to like, I don't know, whatever, have notches in their belt or something, like tap everybody in the gym and be like, I'm the best, I'm the greatest, blah, blah, blah. Like, like you kind of have to also trust that they're not going to be doing that stuff.
Yeah, totally. And also have people who have your back so that if there is someone going around wrist locking all the white belts, that type of stuff's going to be dealt with quickly. And I mean, in my experience, our gym, we don't have any of those issues, thankfully. But I know that, we have this environment where it would be dealt with if push came to shove.
Yeah, and that's another thing too, is like it has to be dealt with. I 100% agree with you. I definitely, because like it's that whole mindset thing, and that's also part of protecting people. So nice. Okay, sorry, I was like, we spent a lot of time talking about mental health, which I mean I'm open to talking about. Thank you for having that conversation with me.
It's a near and dear to my heart.
Me too. Okay, so you just talked about the physical safety, but also kind of like the mental safety, like taking care of each other. So I was curious about, because I know you are a 4-stripe white belt. That's so exciting. That blue belt's coming soon, I bet.
I'm perfectly okay being a 10-year white belt. I am not a belt or a promotion chaser. I'm doing it because I can.
Yeah. That's so exciting though. And I think anyway, that's another mindset thing. So we were just talking about like the nurturing of your training partners, taking care of them, not just with their body, but also having the right attitude and things like that. And it seems like that is something that obviously your gym has nurtured. Our gym nurtures that as well. What other things have you learned through this journey of jiu-jitsu?
Such a good question. I mean, first and foremost, my journey has taught me that I'm so much stronger than I think I am. Mentally, not necessarily physically, although that's coming along. But definitely, like, jiu-jitsu puts you in situations where you have to face fear and you have to be okay with riding that wave and coming out on the other side. And it's super uncomfortable and really, really hard. And I actually say, like, as much as jiu-jitsu is about like the physical training aspect, it's as much mental as it is physical. And so for me, that was actually surprising. And I would say probably 6 months into my journey became more of a challenge for me than the actual jiu-jitsu, although my jiu-jitsu has a long way to go. But, it was sort of around that 6-month mark where, maybe you've got a couple stripes at that point and people are, you're in the gym a lot more and people are knowing who you are. And then imposter syndrome kicks in.
Yep.
And you're like, okay, wait, I'm actually not very good at this. At any moment, someone's going to be like, ha ha ha, told you you weren't good at this. Even though, like, you're showing up and you're training and I know I'm progressing. Like, if I wasn't, someone would say something, right? Or, offer privates or whatever. But your brain starts to play those tricks on you because, you've been there for several months and there's new white belts who are coming in and I think maybe, I can't speak for men because I'm obviously not a man, but as a woman who's older, who, is a mom, knocking on 40's door, but to be like halfway through my white belt and these, brand new 18-year-old white belts are trying out and they're smashing me. And I'm like, wait a minute here. I have been doing this for several months now and I can't get anything on you. And then, right, the imposter syndrome is like, see, told you, this is not for you. You are not good at this, which is like, so they're 19 and they're 200 pounds. And of course they're going to smash you. Yep. So it's, that mental aspect of jiu-jitsu, I think, is where I have learned the most lessons, bar none.
Oh, definitely. Oh my gosh. I 100% agree with you. Yeah, it's a mental game, so much of like a puzzle, so much of a mental overcoming of things. And yeah, oh my gosh. That imposter syndrome is so real.
That's for sure a podcast right there.
That's a whole episode on its own, talking about that imposter syndrome, man. I'm a brown belt now.
Congrats.
It still hasn't gone away. Maybe it goes away with other people, but for me, it still hasn't gone away. There are so many days where I'm just like, I suck. Like, what am I doing? Man, do I even know jiu-jitsu? Like, what am I doing here? Like, but it's just, it's kind of like on those types of days where my imposter syndrome is really bad. I kind of don't want to necessarily like think that my being at the class is necessarily a waste. So like a quote unquote waste, like in my head, So I'm like, that's usually when I try to switch to no thoughts, just vibes. And so that's when I'm just like, okay, well, if I'm bad at this anyway, let's just have fun instead. Yeah.
Which is not bad. It's just your brain is like, hey.
It is just my brain. My brain lies to me all the time about myself, which is something, I don't know if it's ever going to go away. It's a lot better than it used to be. I just don't think it's ever going to go away. I kind of wish it would, but it's probably not going to happen. But yeah, it's just,
I mean, the thing is, you can count yourself in good company because I think a lot of people feel exactly the same way that you do, myself included. And I actually got really good advice from my professor when I was like really struggling with this at one point. I left a Tuesday, we have an early class twice a week. And I went on a Tuesday and got like smashed. Like every single roll got smashed. Like my face, like it was, I left the mat crying. It was just one of those days. Once I calmed down a couple days later, we were talking about it a bit more, and he was saying, you need to come into the gym knowing you have one class where you're going to get challenged like that, and it's going to make you grow, and you're not meant to win, and you're meant to struggle, and it's going to make you better. And you're going to have one class where you come in and, it's, mediocre. You sometimes, pass guard or whatever, and sometimes you don't, whatever. It's 50-50. And you have one class where you come in and it's going to be lots of white belts, and they're similar skill, and you're going to do well, and it's going to be the boost to your ego. It's like, and you need those varying classes, because if you always put yourself in that comfort zone, you're never going to grow. And if you always put yourself in that getting your face smashed off the mat zone, you're going to quit. Mm-hmm. So he's like, find those different classes with those different people, and like vary your training partners, and like put yourself in those uncomfortable situations, because ultimately, when you have those classes that are quote unquote a bit easier, you're going to be like, see, I do know jujitsu. And so like, you just need to kind of, I just thought it was such good advice, because I hadn't really thought of it that way. I'd, obviously just come off the mat being like, I suck. I'm the worst person here today, and I'm not getting better, and this is bananas, and I'm not doing this anymore. And so I just thought it was brilliant advice, because it's true. Like, you have to put yourself in not great situations and put yourself in situations where you're like, yeah, I got this. And maybe I'm not learning as much, but it's my ego's growing a little today, and my confidence. I shouldn't say ego. My confidence is growing a little today.
Yeah, you start to believe like, okay, maybe I can do this.
Yeah,
at least if I can't do the rest of it, I can at least do this.
Yeah, I know how to set these things up.
Yeah, well, I think we all sort of, kind of the longer you go, you start to realize like which type of techniques you tend to naturally gravitate towards. For me, it's chokes. I love a good choke.
I just got a shirt this week that says Queen of Hearts, and Hearts is crossed out, and it says chokes. That's becoming my game.
Maybe I need that shirt.
I'll have to get you one. But I just told all my training partners now what my game is, so hopefully they're not listening.
Oh, well, I mean, it's, whatever. It's fine. Everybody that trains with me, I've said it on the mats before. I'm like, yay, because every time we do chokes, I'm so excited. It's like, yes, we're doing chokes today. Yes, I love chokes. I mean, I'm not like announcing it like that always, but I'm just, dude, I love a good choke. I love chokes. So, I mean, people know, like, also, like, if I'm rolling with someone, I feel like if I tend to get my arm in there, a lot of the time I can get it, And that's not to say that, like, just because I like chokes and I like doing them and stuff. I just, not to say that they work for me every time, because they don't. Like, I've tried chokes before that have failed, or that the person has defended, or that I didn't have the correct grip or whatever, or maybe I was trying to hold on to the grip too long and then my hand gave out, or whatever. Like, it doesn't work all the time, but it's something that I know I can do, and I know that I can do a lot of things, but like, I know I'm like particularly good at this. So I try to do that a lot, but also like, you have to practice everything.
Yes.
But I have my preferences.
Yes, and I feel like I'm in a interesting point in my jiu-jitsu journey where I'm just starting to like figure out my game, like what works for me and what doesn't, and like obviously like I want to be proficient in everything that's being taught, but I also know there are days where they're teaching something and I'm like, you know what, my stumpy fat thighs can't do that. So we're going to practice that. We're going to catalog it, and that won't be part of my game.
Oh my gosh. I can't even count the amount of times I've complained about having short arms and legs on the mats. Everybody that's trained with me has heard me say it at least once or twice. It's like, my arms are so short, I can't get this. Or it's like, my legs are so short. I got these stubbly arms and legs. What am I going to do? And then I have a long torso, so that doesn't really help either. So I always say, like, I'm put together wrong. Like,
you're meant for chokes. That's all it is.
I'm meant for chokes. I'm not meant for triangles. Yeah. I'm meant for chokes.
Triangles are the bane of my existence. Agreed.
Well, listen, though, I do have thick thighs, though. So, like, if I can get a triangle, I can usually get it. But, like, it's getting to the triangle that's the difficult part, because I got these short arms and legs.
Yeah, I'm
So
the same.
it's weird. It's weird for me. I don't particularly enjoy that very much because it's difficult. But again, like part of the other process is like you have to practice the difficult stuff so it's not so difficult anymore. It's like, yes, that's true, but I still don't like it.
Well, I may agree with you. I'm not happy with it. So,
Yeah. I mean, I still practice it though, too, because I know, like, logically, I need to practice because I know, like, the big part of the reason I don't like it is because I'm not skilled at doing that very well.
yeah. I was talking to one of my training partners recently and was saying like triangles as an example or like omoplatas. Like I have a really hard time getting to an omoplata, but there was one time where I was rolling and all of a sudden I just ended up there and was like, oh, well now I know how to finish this. And so I was like, I was like, I think that's the reason why like as much as we're like, oh, I hate this, you never know when you might hit it in rolling. And like if you don't know how to
Exactly.
finish it, you've just lost an opportunity. So, I take it all with a grain of salt and kind of catalog it for the moment where I might need it, but also am realistic. Like, not everything is going to be built into my game because we all have different body types, we all have different skill levels, and just is what it is.
Yep. Agreed. Okay, now I know you've mentioned, and we had a lengthy discussion about chronic illness and how that's affected you. And we just now talked about like maybe our body types are conducive to certain moves over others. But I did want to ask you if you've had or if you've noticed any other type of struggles that you've overcome so far in your jiu-jitsu journey.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I do have a lot of issues with my joints and my fingers. So, I'm already a finger wrapper. And I think like sometimes people are like, what is going on with the weight belt with their fingers wrapped? And I'm like, no, I'm not. This is my first martial arts. I'm not like a black belt in judo. I'm not trying to trick you. I need the extra protection or I'm going to not be able to roll again. Inverting is a challenge for me because of my spine. So, I've kind of had to adjust some things and there's some times where we'll do moves and I'm like, yeah, no, my body's not going to do that. I can try, but it's just not going to happen. And then I think for me, it's been, off the mat, I'm a fairly, competitive person by nature. When I go all in, I go all in, and I have a hard time listening to my body. And so for me, I think that's probably been my biggest challenge. I do train quite a bit. Like I'm in the gym 4 to 6 days a week. I'm pretty consistent, but it's really hard for me to acknowledge on the days where I need a day off. And I think the thing too with chronic illness, when it's invisible, and especially because my daughter trains, right? So I'm in the gym already. And if I've taken a night off, people are like, oh, we being a little lazy tonight. And I'm like, no, you just can't see what I'm feeling. And so that becomes a big challenge. But I know how I'm feeling. And I know when there's
Mm-hmm.
days where I really have to listen to my body. And I know people are just joking and they can't, they're trying to be funny and they don't get it. So I honestly don't take it personally at all, especially because I am there, 4 to 6 days a week. So it's really easy for me to be, shoot back. Oh yeah, how are your 2 classes a week going? Like for someone else. So I think for me, it's just being okay with my reality and giving myself
Mm-hmm.
grace and patience and not being too hard on myself when I do have to respect that my body's just not okay with rolling today.
Yeah. For me, I had a hard time accepting my new reality. It's like, well, this is how it is. Even though it was contrary to what I wanted it to be, what I had hoped it would be, this is what reality is. And so these are kind of the boundaries of your capabilities, and you have to learn how to work within that. And that was extremely hard to adjust to.
Yeah,
And
that's
sometimes it still is.
I was just going to say that. Sometimes it's still very difficult. I've come a long way in the last year. It was a lot harder a year ago when it didn't feel like I was able to do anything. And like fast forward a year, yeah, I actually feel every time I step on the mat, I actually feel, for the most part, we all have bad days, but for the
Mm-hmm.
most part, I actually feel really grateful. And, when our professor talks about like rolling or competing or whatever, he always talks about like, this is a blessing. The fact that you have the means and that you're physically able to do it, like it can be taken away from you at any moment and take it as a gift and take it day by day and be grateful.
Yeah. And I think sometimes when we're in the middle of like a chronic illness flare up, or maybe the chronic illness is messing with our mental health, I think that's a good reminder to have, because I think for at least for me, I know I'm my own worst critic. I see all of my flaws and I point them out to myself. And sometimes I like berate myself. It's like, well, why didn't you fix this? Why are you still doing this? Why this? Why that? You know, blah, blah, blah. And so it's nice to have an outside perspective of someone who doesn't live in my head, who can tell me, like, you're actually doing fine. Like, everybody has good and bad days. Like, you're actually very skilled. Like, people look up to you, know, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, because like a year and a half ago, somebody said, like, oh, yeah, you know, I really look up to you. And I'm just like, me? But I suck. I mean, I didn't say that out loud to them, but I was just like, in my mind, I was like, but I suck. Like, why would you look up to me? But it's just like I was too far in my head. You know, I couldn't see the forest for the trees, you know. And so it's just nice to have that outside perspective. I'm glad that your professor is one of those people for you.
Yeah, he's awesome.
You know, mine is too. You know, when he told me beforehand that he was going to promote me to brown belt, and I literally said no. And he's like, why? And I started crying. And everybody knows that I cry. I'm a crier. I'm a very emotional person. Everybody knows I'm like giggling on the mats when I'm having fun, but then I also, like, if I get emotional about stuff, I cry about it. Everyone knows that. But like, and I started crying, and he basically was like, why not? And I'm like, because I'm not good enough. And he's like, so when should you get it then? And I was like, well, when I'm better. And he's like, so, and he literally says, like, the fun thing about my professor is, like, he says this jokingly. He's like, so you think you know more than me now? It wasn't said in, like, it wasn't a mean thing to say, but it was kind of to give me perspective. It's like, because he's a 5th degree black belt, and he's been doing this for, like, almost his whole life. For, like, 30 plus years, he's been doing this. And so he, like, you know, very kind of gently but firmly asks me, so do you know more than me now? And I'm like, no. You know, so, but I think for me at least, like, I don't remember the whole entire conversation anymore, but I do remember that. And I remember as soon as he said, like, go get your brown, like, you should need to go get your brown belt, I literally said no. Oh man. But I think it was therapeutic for me a little bit to kind of have that conversation with him, because then it was like a reassurance that someone else sees my potential versus me fixating on all of my mistakes and shortcomings. And I think that's such a blessing to have.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I can completely relate. I mean, obviously we're at very different stages in our journey in Jiu Jitsu, but, you know, there's been lots of comments at the gym about, like, my progression. And obviously as a 4th stripe, like, I'm close to blue, but I am in no rush. I genuinely am in no rush. And so you know, there's been lots of conversations, and I've taken that approach of, like, I just need to start trusting people. Like, if they believe I'm at that point, and that I've checked all the boxes, and that I've put in the time on the mat, that my skill level's there, that I'm a good training partner, and that I'm a good person off the mat, because it's as much about what you do off the mat as it is on in some cases, then I need to trust that they know what is best for me. And when it's time for advancement, that's okay. And it's a new challenge in the journey, and I need to respect their opinion and just enjoy it, right?
Yeah. Doing jiu-jitsu has been, like, the most rewarding, but also one of the hardest things I've ever done. Because this is also, I can elaborate on this in, like, another podcast episode, but the basics are, I had never really done something that I couldn't figure out how to be good at, like, right away. And jiu-jitsu, there's no, like, cheat code. Like, you can't just show up and, like, just be good all the time. And so for me, like, the failing and the making mistakes and the not getting it and, like, the, you know, constant over and over, like, the all that stuff was extremely frustrating. And so the process, like, learning to enjoy the process was a huge, like, learning curve for me as a person, because I'm also, like, very impatient for certain things where it's like, I don't want to spend a long time trying to get somewhere. I just want to get there. So doing jiu-jitsu is, like, the exact opposite of that. The journey is the point, you know, the journey is the goal. And so that, I think, was, and I think I'm still, I mean, I'm a lot better about it now, but I think certain times I'm still thinking, like, well, why can't I just figure this out? Why can't I just do this thing? It's a process. It's all a process. It's the journey. The joy is in the journey.
Totally. I joke with
Yeah.
people at our gym that like, a black belt, if you're lucky, is 10 years, could be 15, could be 20. There's really no timeline. You could become a doctor in the same amount of time.
Yeah.
It's a commitment to a journey.
Yeah. A black belt is just a white belt that never quit, never stops training.
True words.
So let me ask you this. I know our conversation is sort of more about like the personal, mental, emotional side of jiu-jitsu and the different things it can bring out and the different things it can kind of bring to light, help with. And that's great, like, because this is also a part of the journey that I think sometimes people don't necessarily talk about a lot. I mean, I think it comes up here and there, but I think being able to have this type of conversation is important. Like, this kind of stuff needs to be talked about because, I think a lot of times, especially beginners, like they might think that they're the only one who feels this way, or that maybe people think that if they're going through these types of struggles, like, then maybe they think like, oh, maybe I'm just not cut out for this. Well, no, that's not true. Like, a lot of people go through these same things. A lot of people have these doubts, like even years down the road. Like, I still do. Like a lot. This is kind of a common thread among all of us, and it's nice to know that you're not doing anything wrong. This is normal to feel this way, and a 4-stripe white belt and a brown belt can agree on feeling all of these things. It's kind of universal type of thing. So I think these kinds of conversations are equally as important as the ones talking about like specific jiu-jitsu and stuff. So I appreciate you coming on here and talking with me about this.
Thank you. No, it's my pleasure. And I agree. Like, there's so much beyond like, this is amazing. And I love training and I intend to get my black belt one day, whether that takes, 20 years, I will keep rolling, especially if my body, just makes the process a little bit longer. But yeah, the mental side of what we're doing, and even just like beyond, mental health and chronic illness, like the strategizing and like it's mental chess. Like,
really
as you're
is.
playing, as you're rolling, like it's like, oh, if they do this, I'm gonna do this. Oh my God, they did this. Now what do I? You're really thinking the whole time you're rolling. And I hope one day it becomes a little bit. It comes out of me a little quicker, a little bit more naturally.
It will, with time and patience, and as you gain more experience, you'll start to be able to predict things, and you start to recognize things as they're being set up. You'll be like, oh, I know what they're going for. It's just, but that's the sort of thing, at least that I've discovered, that's just the sort of thing that comes with time.
Yeah.
Now, I want to ask you, I have 2 last questions here before we sign off. I want to ask you, what would you say to somebody who is still nervous or hesitant about starting jiu-jitsu?
Well, first join the club, because those of us that go into the gym are still nervous many nights, especially when I've looked at the curriculum and I'm like, oh, we're doing takedowns tonight. Great. So those nerves are very, very, very natural, but just walk through the door. Like, honestly, walk through the door, see what the gym's about, take a trial class, talk to some of the people. If if you're like myself, if you're a mom, bring your kids out. That's how, I started with my daughter starting and watching through her and becoming comfortable with the environment enough that I was like, yeah, I think I could do this too. And also, I think when you're starting, just, see what the gym's about, take a trial, and then feel out like, is this the right environment for me? Because it's possible that it's not jiu-jitsu. It could be the environment. So take your time to kind of suss out, is this the right place for me? But yeah, walk through the front door. Like, I've heard stories of people who literally like sit in their cars or like come to the gym 3-4 times before they can ever step through the front door. And so no, that's normal. And fears, face everything and run, or, conquer it and walk through the front door. So just come through the front door. Come to Ottawa. Come train with me. Come to a trial.
Yeah, definitely. And so if people want to come train with you, Ashley, where can they find you on social media to maybe get in contact?
Yeah, so I am on Instagram. My Instagram handle is Ashley__Richer, which is French Canadian, but spelled like richer for those Anglophones out there.
And I'll have that linked in the description and everything below as well. So all they have to do is just click the link.
Cool. Yeah. And I
Yay.
just want to add to, like, if you're not doing jiu-jitsu and you have a chronic illness, or you are doing jiu-jitsu and you have a chronic illness, please follow me on social, DM me, reach out, ask questions. I probably, once every week or two, someone will message me and be like, oh, I have this too. And I know for myself, when I was diagnosed, I couldn't find anyone on social media who looked like me.
Mm-hmm.
I could not find moms or women or people in their, 30s. And so I felt very alone. So jiu-jitsu or not jiu-jitsu, please reach out to me. Like, I would be more than happy to talk more or offer suggestions, or just, be someone who can vent and relate.
Definitely. And that's, I think, in terms of chronic illnesses and just going through stuff, having a person who understands to whatever degree what you're going through, and that you can literally just vent to, and you don't have to explain anything. You can just vent and they'll know what you mean because they've been there. There's so much value in that I don't think people necessarily actively realize. Yeah, I mean, the Chronic Illness Club over here.
We need shirts. We're going to start a club.
Oh my gosh, we should do shirts. The Chronic Illness Club. Okay, I claim that name. I don't know how to copyright stuff, but that's my name. I'm gonna figure something to do with that. Chronic Illness Club. Chronic Illness Jiu-Jitsu Club. I don't know. We'll figure that out. We can do that. We can do that off the air. We'll figure that out. Okay, Ashley, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. This is awesome.
So much.
Such a good discussion.
This was such a great conversation. Absolutely. Okay. That conversation was amazing. I had so much fun, as you can tell, because Ashley and I were laughing and giggling and just having a great time. But also, this conversation did get very deep in terms of what it's like to live with a chronic illness, how that can affect your daily activities, how that can affect your body, your mind, your spirit, and how we deal with it, and how necessary the support of our network, our community, how necessary that support is. So I really hope that this gives you maybe a different perspective on people who have chronic illnesses. A lot of our chronic illnesses are invisible. That is a term, invisible illnesses, because you can't tell that a person is sick necessarily just by looking at them. It's not like I have a broken leg and it's in a cast and I'm using crutches or something. That is visually very obvious that there would be something the matter, that I would have a physical malady, I guess, as it were. But Ashley's chronic illness and my chronic illness, it's all on the inside, so you can't see it. You can't see it from the outside. The only thing you can see is our behavior, I guess, and how we deal with it day by day. So hopefully this gives you guys a different perspective on that kind of thing, and hopefully more grace and understanding and compassion for the people who live with chronic illnesses. And also, maybe if you are living with a chronic illness, maybe this can help you realize that you don't have to let your chronic illness hold you back necessarily from trying jiu-jitsu, because, I mean, Ashley and I, in the beginning of the conversation, we both mentioned that we were diagnosed with our illnesses before we trained jiu-jitsu. So yeah, you don't have to give up on jiu-jitsu just because you might have a chronic illness. So there's also that. And before I go, I have just a few more reminders for you. In terms of getting in contact with me, I have my email address, jujiteraspodcast@gmail.com. I also have my DMs open on Instagram at jujiteraspodcast. I also have my athlete account, which is at jujitera. So you can DM me either of those places. You can also send me an email. If you want to keep up with the podcast, Instagram is probably the best place. I also do have a Facebook page, Jiu-Jitera's Podcast. You can follow me there. I do post the same updates that I put on Instagram. I put them there as well. So for those of you who are not on Instagram, but you are on Facebook, you can follow my Facebook page. If you are looking for a way to support the podcast, the absolute best way that you can do that is to listen to the episodes, share them with your friends, rate the podcast on whichever podcast app you're listening on, and then also leave a review, because the ratings and review engagement helps to tell the algorithm that people like what I'm putting out, and then the algorithm will suggest my podcast to more people. So that's really helpful. If you want more Jiu Jitsu, Jiu-Jitsu content, I do have a Patreon, and I post all of my full episodes there. I also have extras, short little videos, exclusive clips, exclusive episodes that I put out there. I have a few different series going on over there. I think they are under collections that you can check out for the different content that I'm putting out over there. There is a collection about mental health. There's a collection about funny stories that happen on the mats. There's a collection about my life once upon a time in hospitality, where I just talk about the crazy stories and the things that I've seen over there. And I always put special announcements on Patreon first. So the patrons will be the first ones to know anytime anything happens. The patrons were the first ones to know that I opened a merch store. The merch store really started because I just wanted my logo on a t-shirt. And so I was like, how do I get my logo on a t-shirt? And so I went through a couple of different options, and I landed on TeePublic. So I have a TeePublic merch store. So if you go to teepublic.com and you search for Jiu-Jitsu's podcast, you will find me there. And I have a couple of different designs there now. One of them is just the podcast logo, which I have a t-shirt of because, that's what sparked this whole thing in the first place. And I have one that just says Jiu-Jitsu's. And now I'm going to put one on there that says the Chronic Illness Jiu-Jitsu Club. So be looking out for that. I really appreciate you guys listening to my podcast and supporting me and sending me DMs and just all of your messages and your support. I really appreciate it. So until next time, be well, stay safe, and I'll see you then. Thank you so much for listening. If you would like to connect with me while you wait for the next podcast episode, find me on Instagram at Jiu-Jitsu's Podcast and at Jiu-Jitsu. I'm also on Facebook at Jiu-Jitsu's Podcast. You could also email me at jiujitsuspodcast@gmail.com. If you would like to support me in this podcast, you can visit me on Patreon at Jiu-Jitsu's Podcast, where you get early ad-free access to all episodes, plus some bonus content. You could also find me on buymeacoffee.com at Jiu-Jitsu's Pod. Thank you so much for listening. Remember to rate and review. See you next time.